Janitor calmed a crying baby with soap bubbles, not knowing the millionaire father was watching. The sound of a baby crying echoed through the polished marble hallway on the 37th floor of Millennium Heights. It was sharp, desperate, and unrelenting, the kind of sound that made people in tailored suits walk faster, eyes fixed on their phones, pretending it wasn't happening in their orderly, structured world. Savannah Brooks, 29, a janitor at the building, paused as she wiped up a spilled coffee stain near the window. She looked up toward the source of the sound. Near the elevators, a baby stroller stood abandoned. No adult in sight. Just a baby boy, around 8 months old, red-faced from crying, tiny fists flailing, tear-filled eyes searching for something or someone. Savannah glanced around. No one stopped. Not a single soul. She set the mop aside, wiped her hands on her worn apron, and walked toward the stroller. Each step felt like crossing an invisible boundary between your job and not your business. She crouched down to the baby's level. "Hey there," she whispered gently. "Who left you here all alone?" The baby didn't answer, of course, but as his eyes met hers, the crying slowed just a bit. His tiny hands reached out toward her as if he could sense something kind. Savannah gave a soft, bittersweet smile. She knew that feeling all too well, being left behind, unheard. She had left Texas at 19, trying to rebuild a life in Chicago, but the memories never quite faded. Hesitantly, she lifted the baby into her arms. "It's okay now," she murmured, gently rubbing his back. He still cried, but less urgently, more like a whimper. Savannah frowned thoughtfully, then suddenly remembered something in her coat pocket. She pulled out a small plastic bottle. Bubble solution. A silly gift from her nephew last week. She shook it, then brought the wand to her lips. 1, 2, 3. Shimmering bubbles floated into the air, catching the sunlight from the tall glass windows. The crying stopped. The baby's wide eyes followed the bubbles, mesmerized, as if they were the first magic he'd ever seen. Savannah broke into a smile. See, life has small, beautiful miracles too. What she didn't know was that just a few feet away, inside a mirrored elevator, Damon Walsh, the CEO of a rising tech company, had been watching everything. He had come upstairs to pick up his son, Luca, after a routine checkup with the nanny. But the nanny had apparently fled, leaving Luca alone. And in that moment, Damon saw the janitor woman sitting on the floor without a care in the world, blowing bubbles to calm his son, and making him smile for the first time in months since his mother was gone. Damon's eyes, usually cold and calculated, softened. He stepped out of the elevator slowly, almost unwilling to break the moment. Savannah looked up at the sound of footsteps, and for a breathless second, their eyes met. One woman who had always felt invisible, and one man the world never stopped looking at. Savannah was still sitting on the floor, Luca now quiet in her arms, calmly sucking his thumb. Each time a shimmering bubble floated by, the baby let out a soft, delighted coo. She didn't dare move too suddenly, afraid to shatter the fragile piece. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. She looked up, and for the first time she saw the man walking toward her. Damon Walsh, tall, composed, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit. The sunlight from the glass walls reflected in his piercing blue eyes. But in this moment, there was something else there too. Uncertainty, a flicker of emotion he didn't seem used to showing. Savannah stood up quickly, still holding Luca. I'm sorry," she said, voice shrinking. He was crying and there was no one around. I just wanted to help, not interfere. Ha! Damon stopped in front of her, eyes on his son, now fast asleep in the arms of a stranger. "You don't have to apologize," he said, voice calm and deep. "Actually, thank you." Savannah nodded and stepped forward, intending to hand Luca over. But as soon as she did, the baby stirred awake and immediately began crying again, tiny hands reaching back toward her. They both froze. Savannah glanced at Luca, then at Damon, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Seems like he wants to stay with you," Damon muttered, a hint of disappointment slipping through. Savannah quickly shook her head. "I just have a nephew. I guess I'm used to babies." Damon was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke again, this time more carefully. "You work here?" "Yes, cleaning staff, morning shift." She didn't hide it, but there was caution in her eyes. "Do you have experience with childcare?" Savannah hesitated. "I used to work at a community center back in Texas. Took care of infants, ran activity programs, but I had to quit when I moved to Chicago." Damon nodded, thoughtful. "Luca's nanny quit suddenly. I'm having a hard time finding someone I can trust." Savannah didn't answer, only held Luca a little tighter. "Would you be willing to watch him temporarily?" he asked, voice steady but hopeful. "Just during office hours. I'll pay you fairly." Savannah froze. "Me? You want me to look after your son?" "Not just anyone," Damon replied, meeting her gaze. "The only one who's made him stop crying." Savannah felt as if she'd been dropped into a different universe. This wasn't the life she knew, a world of polished glass, climate-controlled offices, and job offers from the most powerful man on the top floor. She glanced down at Luca, now resting his head on her shoulder like they'd known each other forever. Part of her wanted to say no instantly, but another part felt like, for the first time in years, someone truly needed her. "Just temporarily, right?" she asked softly. Damon nodded. "Temporary, or longer, if you choose." Savannah took a deep breath. She knew she'd just stepped through a door, and whatever was waiting on the other side, she had never dared dream of it before. Savannah didn't answer right away. She looked at Damon, then at Luca, his innocent eyes gazing up at her, tiny hand resting gently on her shoulder as if searching for something familiar. A part of her wanted to retreat, to say no, to step away from this unfamiliar situation. She was used to mops and bleach, not to holding the son of a CEO in a luxury office suite. This was a whole different world. She thought about the stares she might get, from the sleek-haired assistants, from admin workers in expensive dresses, from people who had always seen her as invisible. She didn't want to be whispered about, didn't want to step into a space she didn't belong in. But then she looked at Luca again, an 8-month-old child who didn't know class or care about uniforms or status, just needed a warm pair of arms to feel safe. Savannah's grip around the baby tightened. Responsibility. That was a word she had carried for years, ever since Texas, raising her younger sister alone after their mother passed away. She had never turned away from someone who needed her. And then there was the reality. Money. Her janitor's salary barely covered her bills, and she was still helping her sister raise her newborn. A temporary job with decent pay could buy her some breathing room for the next few months. She looked up, her voice quiet but steady. "I'll give it a try, but I don't have any licenses or certifications." Damon gave a slight nod. "I don't need certificates. I need someone my son trusts." The next morning, Savannah arrived earlier than usual. She was still wearing her janitor uniform, a faded light blue polo shirt and worn-out work pants, because, frankly, she didn't have anything else. Stepping into the executive floor lobby on the 37th floor, where Damon's office was located, felt like walking into a different universe. Everything was quiet and intimidatingly pristine. Transparent glass walls, polished hardwood floors, abstract paintings she couldn't begin to interpret. She told herself, "It's just temporary. Do the job well, then leave quietly." Damon stood by the large window, phone to his ear, his voice low but firm. The moment he saw her step in with Luca, he ended the call immediately. "Good morning," he said, glancing briefly at her uniform but showing no trace of judgment. "I really appreciate you coming." Savannah nodded slightly. "This little guy is the only reason I've been up this early all week," she smiled, trying to hide the nerves in her eyes. Damon reached out to take Luca, but as soon as the baby touched his father, he let out a soft whimper and clung tighter to Savannah. Damon chuckled helplessly. "Looks like my son's already picked his side." Savannah laughed with him, relieved she wasn't being scolded. She moved to a small corner of the office where a colorful playmat had been set up with a few brand-new toys. Can I sit on the floor?" she asked, already cradling Luca. "Of course. Make yourself at home," Damon replied. Savannah lowered herself onto the mat, folding her legs beneath her. Luca rested in her lap as if it were the most familiar place in the world. She picked up a rattle from the toy set and gently played with him, humming a lullaby her mother used to sing. No one spoke for nearly an hour. Damon worked just a few steps away, occasionally glancing over, drawn in by the calm, genuine image of the two of them. Savannah, too, felt something unfamiliar. She had worked with children in chaotic, noisy spaces filled with shouting and crying. But here, everything was quiet, and she felt respected, even if just a little. That made her feel afraid of getting used to it, only to lose it later. "Savannah," Damon's voice broke the silence gently. She looked up. "Thank you for coming. I know this is unusual. For both of us." She simply smiled. Unusual, but not bad. And for the first time, she didn't feel like just the cleaning lady anymore. In the days that followed, Damon's office began to sound different. Not just the tapping of keys or the clipped tone of business calls, but the soft laughter of a baby, the jingle of toys in quiet moments, and the whispered voice of a woman who never really belonged in this space. Savannah sat cross-legged on the floor, playing with Luca as if they'd known each other forever. Whenever he cried or fussed, she didn't rush to quiet him. Instead, she listened. "Every cry has its own reason," she once told Damon when he panicked over the baby's wailing. "If it's high-pitched and quick, he's probably hungry. If he's fussing with heavy eyes, he's tired. And if it's just soft whimpers, he might just need a hug." Damon listened carefully, like he was learning a completely new language. "I always thought crying was just crying. It's what babies do." Savannah smiled. "A lot of adults think that, but if you pay closer attention, you'll understand more than you expect." She didn't realize that with each small lesson she gave, Damon was slowly changing. He relied less on his assistant, was less irritable in meetings, and more often wandered over to the play corner, just to sit there for a moment, watching his son sleep in the arms of someone who was no longer a stranger. On a quiet Friday afternoon, while Luca napped on a soft fleece blanket, Damon sat on the nearby couch. No calls, no emails, just silence for once that didn't feel empty. "Savannah," he said softly, gentler than usual, "you make everything easier to breathe." She chuckled. "Only with babies. Adults, I'm still figuring them out." He paused, then let out a breath. "I used to think I was good at controlling my emotions. Then my marriage fell apart." Savannah looked at him, saying nothing. "We split when Luca was 4 months old. She said I was too cold, absent, and I don't blame her. I spent so much time building the company, thinking that was how I protected my family. But in the end, I was alone." Savannah didn't respond right away. She gently stroked Luca's hair, then said quietly, "I've never been married, but I know what it feels like to be left behind. My mom worked herself to exhaustion raising me and my sister, but what I remember most wasn't the birthday cakes. It was when she'd sit on the floor and play dolls with me." Damon turned to her, his gaze softening. "Where did you grow up?" "Texas, a small town with nothing but wind and dust. I used to volunteer at a community daycare. Took care of kids no one wanted, the ones who cried all day or didn't speak at all. I didn't have degrees, but I learned to read every look, every little gesture." Damon nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "That's why. You understand Luca?" Savannah shrugged. "I don't understand everything, but I'm not afraid of his crying." They both laughed, a small laugh but honest. And in that moment, the invisible line between them faded. No longer CEO and temporary help. No longer top floor and basement. Just two people, slowly learning how to reconnect, taught by a baby who didn't need words to show them how. That night, the Chicago air turned colder without warning. Autumn had begun to sneak through the high-rise windows, bringing with it dry air and soft whistling winds. Luca had developed a mild fever after a long, tiring day, and Savannah, without hesitation, chose to stay with him at the office. Damon was still in his private office, finishing up an online meeting. When it ended, he stepped out, planning to walk her to the elevator like usual. But the office was oddly silent. No rattle toys, no soft whispers from Savannah. He walked quietly toward the play area where a dim golden light from a small lamp glowed. And what he saw made him stop. Savannah was seated against the couch, her head tilted slightly to one side, brown hair softly tousled. In her arms, Luca slept soundly, his cheeks flushed with fever, one tiny hand gripping her collar as if afraid to let go. A warm cloth rested carefully on his forehead, and Savannah's hand still gently cradled his body, even as she had fallen asleep. Damon stood frozen for a long moment, saying nothing, doing nothing, but something in him, something long buried, cracked open as he watched her, not just because his son was safe, but because for the first time in years, someone had made that safety feel sacred. It wasn't just that Luca was being cared for. It was how he was being cared for. With tenderness, with complete presence, with something Damon, for all his effort, hadn't yet been able to offer. The feeling caught him off guard. He was used to control, but around Savannah, all he wanted was to stay still, let the moment exist without needing to explain it. He stepped closer, gently laying a blanket over her shoulders. As he did, his eyes lingered on Savannah's face, so peaceful, tired, yet strangely soft. And he realized, when was the last time he had looked at someone like that? From that night forward, something changed, though neither of them said anything. Savannah found her heart beating faster whenever Damon walked near. She tried to act normal, but sometimes his gaze made her forget where to place her hands or how to sit without fidgeting. Damon, too, started spending more time at the office, even when there were no meetings. He'd claim to check plans or read reports, but deep down, he just wanted to be near her. He found himself glancing toward the play corner more often, watching how Savannah would rock Luca gently, or how she'd smile at the smallest giggle. Something about those moments began to linger, longer than they should have. Each action was small, a cup of hot coffee waiting for her when she looked tired. A new cushion added to Luca's play corner. A lingering glance that lasted a second too long. No words were spoken, but the air between them had changed. Not love, not yet. And certainly no promises. Just something gentle, undefined but deeply real. A feeling that didn't yet have a name, but was strong enough to stir both of their hearts. In the days that followed, the 37th floor settled into a new rhythm. Not quite love, but a quiet connection that made each morning feel strangely familiar. Savannah walked into the office with ease now. Damon, though still composed in meetings, had changed. With her and Luca, he was softer, slower, present. But peace is sometimes just a pause before the storm. That day, Savannah sat on the playmat as usual, stacking colorful blocks and softly humming a lullaby. Luca giggled and clapped, demanding more. The office door swung open. The sound of heels tapped sharply against the hardwood floor. A woman walked in, tall, elegant, polished to perfection. Her leather coat hugged her figure, her designer bag hanging with effortless grace. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the room with a glance that felt like judgment. Savannah quickly stood up. Something in her gut told her this woman wasn't just a visitor. "And you are?" the woman asked, voice laced with power. "I'm Savannah. I help take care of Luca while Mr. Walsh works." The woman didn't reply. She simply looked her up and down, slowly, measuring, then turned to Luca, who was now crawling toward Savannah. "I see," she said coolly. "Vanessa Clark, major shareholder, co-founder, and Damon's former partner." Savannah's heart sank a little. Vanessa stepped closer, still wearing her thin, unreadable smile. "What did you do before this?" "Cleaning staff. Before that, community center work." "Fascinating," Vanessa nodded. "Not many companies promote their janitors to CEO babysitter." Savannah felt stripped bare under that gaze. She instinctively picked Luca up, holding him close like a shield. Moments later, Damon entered. He froze when he saw Vanessa. "I didn't know you were coming." "I like surprises," she said smoothly. "We need to talk about the new investment round, and I was curious to see who your new companion was." Damon glanced toward Savannah. She had turned away, pretending to be occupied with a toy. They stepped into the meeting room, but the door didn't close all the way. Savannah didn't mean to listen, but she heard every word. "You really think it's a good idea bringing her into the office?" Vanessa's voice was sharp. "She's done nothing wrong," Damon replied. "She doesn't fit, not because she's bad, but because she's a liability to the company's image. Press, investors, they won't accept the CEO cozying up to a playroom girl from the janitor's closet." "Savannah isn't a liability. She's a risk, whether you admit it or not." Savannah didn't hear the rest. She held Luca tightly, a lump forming in her throat. That feeling of being seen through, judged, dismissed, rose quietly, painfully. She knew she didn't belong here. Those peaceful days had made her forget for a moment. She had allowed herself to hope. But reality had returned, cold, sharp, and unforgiving. Kindness and care weren't always enough to stay. That night, Savannah didn't sleep. She held Luca a little longer before leaving the office, pressing a soft kiss to his forehead like a silent goodbye. Damon was still in a meeting with the shareholders. She didn't want to interrupt, didn't want to hear excuses. The next morning, Damon walked into his office and instinctively looked around, but the play corner was empty. No soft laughter, no faint scent of chamomile tea that she always brewed. Just a letter placed neatly on his desk. "Mr. Walsh, thank you for the opportunity. I never thought I would be trusted this way, but some places are not meant for me. And I don't want to be a burden to anyone, especially Luca. He is the most precious child I've ever cared for. I hope you find someone better, someone who fits. Wishing you all the best." Savannah Damon read it again and again. His chest tightened as if something had been taken from him, and he didn't know how to get it back. Luca changed after that. He grew fussy, cranky, refused to nap unless someone hummed beside him. The crying wasn't easy anymore, and Damon felt the absence deeply, not just of a caretaker, but of a heart that had once soothed the storms inside his child. Vanessa returned that afternoon, a thick black folder in hand, heavy with purpose. "This is a media summary," she said, placing it on Damon's desk. Her work history, past addresses, community groups she was involved in. Damon's brows furrowed. "What are you doing?" "I'm protecting you, and this company." Vanessa's voice was sharp as a blade. "We're about to sign a $12 million deal. The last thing investors want is a personal scandal." She pushed another set of papers toward him. "The agreement. You sign this, I'll make sure all traces of her disappear from the media. But she needs to stay gone. Permanently." Damon sat in silence. In his mind, Savannah's soft voice lingered, the sound of her singing, her hand gently placing a cloth on Luca's forehead. That night he had a fever. She wasn't a risk. She was the only thing that had made this all feel real. The pen rested in his hand. He stared at the line that read, "Investment Agreement." One signature, and all the mess would be over. But then he set the pen down. "No," he said quietly. Vanessa narrowed her eyes. "Are you insane?" "No, I just realized I already lost one good thing by chasing the numbers. I won't lose another." No deal was signed that day, but no one walked into his office to smile at him either. No familiar voice, no warmth, no Savannah. She was gone. And all Damon had left was the silence she left behind. The early winter wind swept through Chicago, colder than usual. Damon stood in front of an old apartment building tucked deep in the western suburbs. He had never been to this part of the city before, but he recognized the rusted silver door from the return address on Savannah's letter. He had lost the company just as they had warned. After refusing to sign the deal, investors pulled out. The board pushed back. Stock prices dropped. But strangely, Damon didn't regret it, not in the way people thought he would. He knocked, his heartbeat uneven. A moment later, Savannah opened the door. She wore a loose sweater, her hair loosely tied. Surprise flickered in her eyes. "Damon?" Her voice was soft, almost like wind. "I'm sorry for coming unannounced," he said, hands tense at his sides. She opened the door wider. The apartment was small, modest, but warm. The faint smell of baked goods lingered in the air, and a soft lullaby played from an old radio. "Where's Luca?" he asked. "Asleep," she said. "I'm helping my sister watch him for a few days." Damon nodded. The quiet gave him no room to hide. "Savannah, I lost the company." She paused, turning to look at him. "I'm not here asking for help," he continued. "I'm here for the one thing I can't lose. You and Luca." Savannah said nothing. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Do you remember that idea you once mentioned? The app that helps parents decode their baby's behavior, cries, movements, facial cues." She nodded slightly. "I've started a new startup, based entirely on that. No shareholders, no Vanessa, no investors with strings attached. Just one goal, to help parents truly connect with their children." She stared at him, stunned. "But the idea was yours?" "And you'll be the co-founder," Damon said, voice steady. "I don't want to build it without you, not just because of your skills, but because of your heart, the way you look at Luca, the way you listen to what others miss." Savannah hugged her arms around herself as if holding back a tremble. "I left because I didn't want to be a burden to you." "No," Damon shook his head, his eyes beginning to shine. "You were never a burden. You were the only one who made me want to be a better man." Silence stretched between them. "I'm not asking you to come back out of pity. I'm here because I love you. No conditions, no expectations. Just give me a chance to stand by you, as a father, as a man, and, if you'll let me, as a partner." Savannah bit her lip. Her eyes shimmered. "Are you sure I'm nothing like the world you come from?" "Exactly," Damon stepped closer, "which is why I need you in it." She didn't answer, but her arms slowly opened, trembling, and Damon stepped into them. For the first time, with nothing left to hide, nothing left to lose, only something to hold. And finally, he had found it again, 6 months later. Chicago's largest tech convention center gleamed under stage lights and thunderous applause. Banners lined the halls with a single word: Heart Signals. The first app using AI and behavioral data to help parents decode the needs and emotions of their infants. In the front row sat investors who had once turned their backs on Damon, now sitting upright, eyes locked on the stage. Major media outlets were present, cameras pointed, mics ready. The spotlight followed the footsteps of Savannah Walsh, a petite woman in an elegant ivory dress. No longer the janitor from a high-rise office. Today, she was co-founder, the face of an idea that redefined modern parenting. She held the microphone, hands slightly trembling, but her voice steady. Heart Signals wasn't born in a lab, she said. It was born in a quiet room where a baby had a fever and a father was learning how to love his child. Silence swept the room. I'm not a tech expert, I was just someone who listened, and that, listening, changed everything. Not just for that child, but for me too. Applause broke out. Then Damon stepped onto the stage, joining her. He gently took her hand before facing the cameras. "She's not just my wife," he said, voice filled with pride. "She's the reason I understand my son." A louder round of applause followed. Their eyes met, and in that glance there was everything. Not just success, not just love, but recognition of every quiet battle they'd fought and won together. Behind them, the Heart Signals logo glowed, a heart drawn from sound waves, symbolizing the invisible connection between parents and their children. Damon turned back to the audience. Technology can change the world, but love, quiet, steady, and real, is what shows us the way. After the launch, headlines lit up. From janitor to million-dollar co-founder, Savannah Walsh's journey inspires the tech world. But to Savannah, the greatest reward wasn't in stock value or investor numbers. It was coming home, kicking off her shoes, and seeing Damon sitting cross-legged on the floor, playing with Luca, both laughing like little kids. When Luca reached for her hand and looked at her with that same gaze he once gave his first friend, she knew she didn't just belong here. She had found her place, and more importantly, that place had chosen her too. That night, after the stage lights dimmed, after the applause faded and headlines were written, they returned home to a new apartment. Not luxurious, but warm, simple, and enough. Luca sat in the center of the living room, gripping a small bottle of bubble solution. He squealed with laughter every time the bubbles floated and popped in midair. Savannah sat cross-legged on the rug, her hair down, eyes glowing with quiet joy. Damon was beside her, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up, leaving everything else outside the door. "Careful, Luca," Savannah giggled as the toddler tipped the bottle and spilled some on the carpet. "Do you remember?" Damon turned to her, voice soft. "It all started with a bottle of bubble soap." Savannah looked up at him, then smiled. "You were ready to bolt from the room because he wouldn't stop crying. And you walked in calmly," he chuckled, pulled out that bottle like it was magic. Savannah nodded, then glanced at Luca, now stretching his hand toward a floating bubble, eyes wide with wonder. And from someone who believed that sometimes listening to a child is the most magical thing of all. Damon didn't reply, but the way he looked at her said everything: gratitude, love, and a flicker of sorrow for the time they almost lost. Savannah reached out and took his hand, not tightly, not dramatically, just a quiet link, yet deep enough to anchor a soul. In that moment, the world slowed. There was no past or present, no CEO and temporary staff, no skyscrapers and basements, just family, a family born not from blood or titles, but from choosing each other every single day. Luca crawled over, handed the bottle to Savannah, his way of saying, "Your turn." She blew gently. Dozens of tiny bubbles drifted upward. Luca laughed again, loud and free. Damon watched them, one hand braced behind him, eyes following every motion, saying nothing. No words needed. Because what mattered most, they had already kept, and everything else they wanted to say was already there in that look.